Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Facebook Live Youth Soccer Q&A, tips on how to achieve optimal performance and long-lasting success. I'm your host, Andy Reaver with Orlando Orthopedic Center, and we are here at the awesome, fabulous Spectrum Performance Center. Big thank you to Spectrum and all the folks here for letting us host this event here tonight. So awesome. Thank you guys so much. Also joining me this evening is our expert panelists. We have Carrie Lawrence from the Orlando Pride. We have Dr. Jeffrey Downing from Orlando Orthopedic Center. We have Danny Sposato from Spectrum, and we have Mark Hansen with the Florida Craze Crush Soccer Club. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. I also want to give a very special thank you out to our FKK families and our kids and athletes that are watching. I know you guys finished up with practice, probably a little sweaty, pulling out your cell phones and watching us right now. If you have any questions, please type them into the Facebook Live Q&A session. We really appreciate it. All right, now before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. First, all of our things that we're going to be talking about today, we're going to hone in and specialize right into that optimal performance and long-term success on and off the soccer field. Now, a lot of you have sent us questions already, and thank you so much for doing that prior to the live broadcast. If you have not asked any questions yet, that's okay. You can go into Facebook Live, and in that comment section, you can type in your question, and I'll do our very best here to answer those for you to our expert panelists. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to know a little bit more about our panelists. So, Carrie, if you don't mind, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Carrie Lawrence. I am from Orlando, Florida, played for FKK. I also played collegiate soccer at UCF, and I currently play for the Orlando Pride.
I'm Dr. Jeff Downing. I work for Orlando Orthopedic Center in the Castleberry Walk-In Clinic. I've been working for Orlando Orthopedic Center for 5 years.
Hey there, Danny Sposato with Spectrum Sports Performance. I am the head performance coach for FKK. I've been with the club now for 3 years. This is my 6th year with the company as a whole, and I'm a bachelor. I have my bachelor's from University of Central Florida in Sport and Exercise Science.
Hey everyone, I'm Mark Hansen, Director of Operations at FKK, former Division I athlete and collegiate coach as well.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Let's get right to the questions, guys. First one here that popped up, this is from Mark. Mark, how and why does the club work with both sports medicine and sports performance groups to benefit the players?
Yeah, we have a great partnership with both Spectrum and Orlando Orthopedic to provide the very best care for our athletes. Our club focuses on developing the total player, and long-term success of our players needs to focus also on the physical component, which is them staying healthy and being able to perform, and also being able to develop physically to perform on the field. We can develop them physically on the field a little bit, but for maximum success, we've identified the need to partner with Spectrum, and we partner with Orlando Orthopedic to maintain our players' physical ability.
Awesome, and just kind of a follow-up to that, it benefits me. Do you guys, or do you find it that other club organizations, whether it's here locally or nationally, work with these other entities? Do you find that as commonplace now?
Yeah, I believe that more and more organizations are starting to seek out potential relationships like we have with Orlando Orthopedic, but it's not on the regular at the moment. But I do believe that not many organizations in youth sports focus on creating partnerships like we have with Spectrum to really focus on that development aspects of our athletes. We recognize that our athletes are developing a certain set of muscle cores as soccer players, but for them to be well-rounded athletes, Spectrum does a great job to really focus on those other muscles to ensure that our players can stay healthy and stay on the field.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next question here. Just popped up. Dr. Downing, my daughter has been battling shin splints for a little while now. What are ways to treat them, and is there any way that you can prevent them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very common in soccer to get shin splints. The other name for that is anterior tibial syndrome. It's where you get inflammation at the backside of the muscle at the front part of the shin. It's very common. It happens with any type of sport where there's a lot of running and changing direction. The treatment's pretty easy. It's mostly related to decreasing the inflammation, getting some rest, and stretching out properly. Preventative-wise, sometimes it's very hard to prevent when there's significant amounts of play. It is an overuse injury. It can be prevented by proper stretching and or post-participation ice. It's a very tasking problem because a lot of the athletes want to rest, and that's probably the best thing for it. But it is pretty challenging.
Okay. And here, and this again, some of these questions, guys, another one just popped up here, work hand in hand together. So this is for Danny. Danny, what are some important aspects of proper warm up and cool down?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Right off the jump, we always talk about the body as a kinetic chain, right? Every part of our body is connected. And when we look at our most internal portion, we're talking about our core. So we talk about muscles throughout the abdominals, to the hip complex, glutes. And so one of the surprising ones we always get is core and glute activation, right? Everything we're going to do on the field requires our whole body to move in unison. And so making sure that the inside is turned on and activating. So something like a plank and a glute bridge, you'd be surprised how long or how far that goes. From there, we typically move on to hitting all 4 parts of the hip. So anterior, lateral, medial, and posterior. So think like hip flexors and quads, hamstrings and glutes, things like that. So this can be done like dynamic stretching, things like walking lunges and reaching, grass sweeps, things like that. And then from there, it's really important to understand when we go into practice, we're moving, right? And we're going at full speed. And so we have to bridge that gap in the warm-up. It's not enough to just bang out a couple stretches and then boom, I'm ready to run. So we work in things like skips for height, skips for distance, a couple like fast feet drills, a couple build-up sprints, things like that. And then on the cool-down side, we're essentially just trying to flush out, right? Get the body relaxed a little bit. We've just gone through high-intensity bouts, a lot of blood rushing, a lot of lactic acid buildup. So this we kind of just go more into walking dynamic stretches, things that just kind of flush out the body a little bit, get them loose to help kind of start speeding up the recovery process.
Okay. And again, this is a great kind of follow-up to all that. And this is really for Danny and Dr. Downing. So how does strength training directly relate to injury prevention, or how do you guys incorporate that?
Yeah, I mean, strength training is obviously a very important part of any athletic type of endeavor. Most of the studies show that stronger muscles, better ligamentous and tendinous strength does lead to less injuries and less major injuries. This can be all the way down to 8, 9 years old with the proper type of level of weight and repetitions. It should be incorporated earlier than people think. No studies show any issue with growth plate abnormalities. That has been disproven multiple times over. There really is, any sport you're playing, especially one at an intense level like soccer, really should incorporate strength training to help prevent injury and enhance performance.
Yeah, and to build off that, and Mark had touched on it earlier, playing soccer repetitively year-round like a lot of these kids do, you're going to build up certain asymmetries throughout the body, right? Soccer is a lot of short sprints, quick cuts. You're talking a lot of work going to the quads, hips, glutes. One of the more neglected issues becomes hamstrings, right? And so one of the things we can do to help mitigate that is to build up the muscles that are not going to get worked through soccer. So like posterior chain exercises are such an important part and such a massive part of what we do in this building, just understanding that our asymmetries are often what lead to injuries.
Carrie here, we just got one that popped up for you. Don't worry, we didn't forget about you. Carrie, how important do you think nutrition is, and I mean, how vital of a role has it played in your development over the time from high school, club, all the way to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think we talk about like cool down and warm up, but I think even before warm up comes nutrition. So like before you even get to the field, nutrition is something that you should really, really focus on. I think I've learned that growing up, maybe the hard way, but I just think that it's something that can be overlooked pretty easily, but I think it's super important. Fueling your body properly before and then immediately post, because that's just as important. So yeah, I think as we get older, you'll start to realize it plays more of a toll. So, but I think it's just as important as a cool warm up, cool down, and everything in between.
Awesome.
I actually got something.
Yeah, go, Mark. Go for
question for you guys. One of the things that I see with our players now, and like Carrie said, some of the shortcuts that some of them may make at younger ages, we're starting to see some of our high school age players taking energy drinks right before a game, thinking that that's beneficial to them. And we're trying to explain that long term of the need for water and things like that, but maybe you guys can talk about how those short energy drinks are not really beneficial for these long-term endurance sports.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, most of the energy drinks are going to be high in caffeine. They're going to be high in some B12 and things that maybe give you a short-term beneficial scenario. But in the end, you're not going to be as hydrated. You're going to have more injuries. You're going to have issues that may or may not affect your kidneys, may or may not affect your GI tract. Obviously, hydration and electrolyte supplementation are going to be number one when you're talking about any athlete. It's a short-term benefit with energy drinks versus, you know, doing it the right way with hydration and electrolytes. I don't think you're going to get anything out of it in the long term. It's purely short-term benefit.
Carrie, just again, a fellow playing at the level that you're playing at currently, what do they give you at halftime or recovery post game? What type of stuff do they give you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. They really push, like, because you can only feed your body so much before a game, and then halftime is like a really crucial time to try and get as much food and nutrients in you as you can. So it's bananas, it's gummy bears, it's like a little bit of sugar just to like keep you going, and then obviously like bananas like a carbohydrate. But it's honestly anything that you can get into your body in that short amount of time. So a lot of water, electrolytes, salt to replenish everything that you're losing. But yeah, it's whatever you can get down in that little bit of time.
Okay. Question here, Dr. Downing. We have another injury-related question. How do we treat tendinitis in the knee? Special stretches or wraps, braces that can help?
Yeah, I mean, tendinitis in the knee is obviously something we see a lot. The knees do take a beating no matter what sport you're doing, or you're just a weekend warrior riding a mountain bike. You know, tendinitis is an inflammation of a muscle connection to a bone. With any type of movement, it's going to irritate that. So, you know, you're always going to treat that with rest and ice early, and then rehabilitation and heating later on. Sometimes you do have to shut down for a little bit and not do that activity that's precipitating that. Other times you can kind of stretch it out and get through it. Depends on the level of the inflammation. You know, the big one in the knee is patellar tendinitis, which is really common. It's something that is very tasking to treat, again, because people like to keep going and they don't like to rest. But this is something that whenever you have inflammation in the body, you got to get that inflammation under control and then rehab it the proper way so that it won't come back, because you want to get back to that activity that you've been trying to do.
Okay, very cool. So this question here, we may have a injury here in the audience as well. I think this is probably for Dr. Downing, maybe Danny. How would we suggest recovering, coming back from a broken collarbone? So I don't know if you do the sport-specific rehab of it, but obviously how you come back and functionally. But maybe Dr. Downing can talk a little bit on the rehab from that.
Yeah, so I mean, on our end, so we have a return sport group here that we love. Typically, we're bridging that gap between leaving physical therapy and then entering back into full speed, right? So for us, our big cues we've been giving them a healthy clearance. They've been cleared to start any activity, but obviously they're not ready to jump back right in, right? So for us, we're first trying to establish full range of motion. We're then beginning to introduce some kind of resistance, typically building on stabilizers at the joint, starting to protect the joint, the muscles that are going to maintain the joint and keep it in position, not necessarily your big prime movers. And then from there, once they've shown, you know, ability to move through without any kind of pain, introduction of resistance, we start working back into compound movements.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the opposite end. I'm like before the physical therapy's done, so I probably should have answered this first. But, you know, obviously there's stabilization early and immobilization to allow the bone to heal. And then you introduce, and my end is all about getting full range of motion. And then we move on to muscle strengthening and sport-specific type of movements that potentially could limit participation. So once we get full range of motion, then they're cleared to begin more specific stuff that is related to that sport. And then once that strengthening improves, then they go to a facility like Spectrum and get into the level where they could start practicing at a full level and then get back into game speed and practice speed.
Very cool. So this question, I'm skipping around here because I really like this question. see if I can find it here. So what if my son, and this is really, I think, for all of you, honestly, if my son or daughter is hurt or injured, should they still come to practice? Straightforward, yes or no?
I think from like the athlete perspective, I think it's really important to stay around the environment. I think just for like the mental aspect of it, to be around everyone and to just hear the coach and like be the camaraderie like with the team. I think it's really important to be around the team, whether you're injured and you can't play or you're just now returning from injury. So that's mine.
I mean, I agree. I have seen both ends of it in the office where some younger kids get upset that that are at practice and they're not playing.
Right.
So I have to gauge in the office and talk to the parent and kind of get what kind of kid they are.
Sure.
If they're kids that really are involved and they want to continue to learn and be around the environment, I 100% think that that's a good idea. But then I wouldn't be upset if the kid said, if he doesn't get upset that he's at practice and he's not doing anything, it might be better for that kid to stay home. But I've seen both ends of it.
And Danny, like, again, I'll prompt you here, but I'm assuming if they can still come to a workout and do a different body part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to touch. So on the coming in the facility, we absolutely encourage it. It's one of the biggest reasons we always have 2 coaches in the facility at all times, specifically just with FKK, so that if we have an individual who comes in with a lower body injury, we can easily modify. They have their own special circuit. We're going to do all upper. We're still going to do core. We're going to do all the things that they are able to do without chancing any kind of additional harm to whatever's going on. And then vice versa, if it's upper body injury, we can easily modify, digress, and work lower body and core.
Yeah, and from a club perspective, we want to make sure that it's the player's safety first. So it really depends on the injury that they're coming back from. If we have a player that just suffered a concussion, we don't really want them out in the light, things like that, till we get medical clearance that, hey, they're okay to be out there. But once they're out there, we really encourage them to be around as much as they can. Because they can really develop that mental side of the game. They can see the game maybe from a different angle as opposed to playing in it. They can step back and watch and see and learn from listening and watching as well.
Very cool. Questions are really coming in here. This is great. This is kind of a sidebar question. Are all of these services that are being offered, are they offered to all FKK teams?
Yeah, so this is through all FKK. With Orlando Orthopedic, all their information is on our website, as well as distributed out at the beginning of the year when we do our webinars in the summer, with regards to contact numbers, and I think we'll get into the walk-in clinic and the benefits of that. But with Spectrum, we have a partnership with them. So for the players that are not in Spectrum currently, that they have the ability to let them know that they are an FKK player and they can get come into Spectrum and work exclusively with them through that partnership.
Very cool. Here's a great question. Again, I'm going to direct this really towards everyone and their experience. How important is sleep and rest before competition?
Massive. I can jump in. I mean, one of the things we always try to explain, like, think of the workload of the average athlete. They're probably practicing 3-4 times a week, right? They might have 1 to 2 games on the weekend, just kind of depending, right? It's a lot of volume, it's a lot of wear and tear. Like, we see kids get beat down, and if we have games on that weekend and that Friday night, like, our sleep is one of our most advantageous times to recover. It's when our body does our healing. And so I can tell you from the muscular side of it, one of the easiest ways to not be crushed, to not be sore on game day, is to get your 8 hours.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think that it's very undervalued, the amount of sleep that you need from a recovery standpoint. And then you talk about athletes that make mental mistakes during games. I guarantee you could look at, it's not just the physical side. It's being alert, being awake, and knowing what's going on. Your brain really, really relies on this to be able to be at your best performance-wise. So there's no substitute from a recovery standpoint and or from a mental aptitude standpoint than more sleep.
I can definitely attest for that. Like, I can go to training some days and I know I didn't sleep enough, and it is shown on the field. So I think it's just really important. Just like how I was talking about nutrition, sleep is just as important.
So I have a follow-up question for you. And being a college athlete at UCF when you were, and knowing the demands on your time, whether it's workouts in the morning, treatments, practice, treatments again, and then you got to go and study back in your dorm, there may be very little time for sleep, right? So how do you manage that, or is there any tips that you were to get that right amount of sleep before competition, knowing your time is so constrictive?
Yeah, I think for me, planning my study hours was just as important as planning my sleep. So I knew what time my classes were, I knew what time my practices were, games, etc. So I always made it a point to make sure I get at least 7 hours of sleep, which in college it can seem outlandish to, 7 hours, that's a lot. It's really not. You have to be able to time manage and figure that out, because it is just as important as eating dinner that night for me.
Sure.
So.
Great. Okay, moving on here, we have an ACL question. Females are more prone to ACL tears. Are there workouts they can do to help prevent that injury?
I don't know if you want to speak on the why that maybe is, and I can dive in with.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read, I mean the way that women are built, the way their hips are, the way that their knees valgus in a little bit, it does make you more prone to the terrible triad of the medial collateral ligament, the anterior cruciate ligament, and the medial meniscus. It's just the way that the angle of the running goes, and it just puts you at greater risk for a valgus mechanism of injury, which is something where the knee goes in towards the inside and into extension. So that's just why it happens. Certainly, here at Spectrum, they can work on strengthening exercises to prevent this. You got to put yourself in the best position to not get that injury.
Sure.
It's not completely preventable, but you can put yourself in the best position. So.
Yeah, and so another really important thing that we emphasize here is we talk about our speed and agility work, and it's a big part of every session. But a big part of that is learning the patterns. It's a neuromuscular patterning issue a lot of times if you watch athletes cut, and it's just more prone, females, because of their hip angle, typically there is less muscle throughout their quads, and as a result, times when they cut, their knees will go into valgus, and you can kind of see it. And so it's such a big part of what we do, and all of our athletes know exactly what they are. We call them drop squats, where they're standing up tall, they rip down, they drop into a good athletic stance, with an emphasis on driving their knees out, right? Because getting their knees out puts them in a safer position. They have a more proper joint alignment through ankle, knee, and hip. Less wear and tear, less stress throughout the knee and all the different ligaments that go into it. And so a big part of it is not only strengthening the posterior chain and balancing out the imbalance between quad to hamstring, but also then learning how to cut effectively, learning how to jump and all those things efficiently with our knees out in a good, safe position.
Good, cool. Here for probably both Danny and Mark, how do you guys provide training for specific position training drills? I'm going to repeat that. How do you provide training for specific position training drills?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we try to focus on with work partnering with Spectrum is not necessarily focusing on a specific position. Obviously, specific positions have different needs, but a lot of the times as an athlete in general, the generalization is that the development of the athlete is going to be similar. Goalkeepers are going to focus on some different muscle core groups when they come into the center potentially at times. Also, with our training program with our players, certain field positions obviously are going to need a higher demand for an aerobic fitness workout as opposed to an anaerobic fitness workout. And I'll let Danny touch on that.
Yeah, so we're certainly identifying, based on different positions, the different positions that obviously are required to run more throughout the game, depending on, midfielders are obviously moving more throughout the game than defenders, and as a result, their aerobic capacity is a little bit more important, right? Then flip to a keeper, where they need to be powerful. They need to be able to explode their first step. They have such a short window to make their move and hopefully make the save, right? So their vertical ability that we're always testing throughout, we put a little bit more emphasis on that. But another big part of it is we want to build well-rounded overall healthy athletes. And so knowing what they have to do on the field and what compensations that creates, and then doing the opposite in here to help alleviate them is really important for us as well.
We have like a ton of questions popping up, so this is awesome. I don't know how much time we can get all these in. This question, I love this one, directed towards Carrie. How do you think team bonding can affect the way you play?
I think it's huge. I think this is a team sport for a reason. I can tell you some of my most successful years playing soccer was the tightest that my team has ever been. Like, our chemistry was unmatched, and it definitely showed on the field. Whether you were playing 90 minutes or you didn't even step on the field, everyone felt like they were part of the team. They knew their role. They accepted their role, and I think that is what makes a really successful team, is the team camaraderie and everyone enjoying like what they're doing and where they're at in their journey of soccer. So I think, yeah, it's very important.
Very cool. Okay, another question. This is Dr. Downing. It's kind of a two-parter here. Dr. Downing, you work at walk-in clinic. Do you evaluate concussions there? And then kind of as a follow-up, if my child has a head injury but it's not a concussion, is it safe for them to remain playing practice games, etc.?
Okay.
So I can go back if you need me to.
Yeah, we do evaluate concussions at all of our walk-in clinics throughout town. I work specifically in the one in Castleberry. My partner, Dr. Mike McCleary, does that in concussion evaluations as well. We do initial evaluation of concussion, and then we also do clearances to return to play. The follow-up question regarding head injury, there's not too many head injuries that aren't concussion related. So there certainly could be some neck injuries, some spinal neck problems. Most of the stuff we see head-wise in the office and in the walk-in clinics is all concussion related. You could do a whole panel just on concussions right now.
Sure.
Regarding what to do. What I would tell you is that there's no such thing as a mild concussion or a major concussion. You either have a concussion or you don't, and you need to be cleared by a medical professional that deals with concussions on a regular basis. Don't see someone who isn't skilled in concussions, because it's very important from a clearance standpoint to return to play at the proper time, because concussions, when they are added together, are not additive, they're multiplicated. So one concussion plus one concussion does not equal 2, it equals more like 10. So you have to be very, very careful with these and make sure you're seeing the right professional.
Awesome. And again, a little bit of a follow-up. What other services and what else do you see at the injury walk-in clinic?
Yeah, we see all major injuries that are orthopedic related. Most of the time we're seeing concussions, we're seeing ankle sprains, fractures, small lacerations, strains, sprains, anything that you would normally see at a regular office, or maybe go to the emergency room for, that isn't really needed to go to the emergency room. We take care of all of those conditions right there. We have x-ray on site. We do casting, splinting. We do durable medical equipment. We see ongoing care as far as osteoarthritis goes. Any type of joint or muscle injury we see. We also see spine evaluations as far as strains or sprains, evaluation for discs. And I specifically do osteopathic manipulation in the office, which is similar to chiropractic, but I do that as an add-on as well.
Okay, very cool. Here, this would be for, I believe, Danny. Can you talk about, also Mark, can you talk about proper periodization with training intensities for competitions and post-competition? How can this best be managed at tournaments and multiple game weekends?
Yeah, I can start from the physical and what we're doing in here. So one of the things we'll do is we plan our year out essentially in advance, right? We have our fall season, we take break for high school, and then we come back in the spring, and we understand how that year goes. And obviously knowing that the spring is more important, and as we work, or more competitive, and as we work kind of into April, we start getting into essentially the most important part of the year, right? And so our program design in here essentially allows for the ebbs and flows of the season, and we're building up, and then we kind of take that break going into high school. Athletes come back in the spring. There's a reintroduction period where we're starting low, so we're not crushing anyone or frying anyone right from the jump, reintroducing everything, and then we kind of build back up as we get throughout the middle of the spring. And then there has to be a tapering off and almost more into speed and power stuff, because we want the athletes to be primed come April, May, come the end of the spring season. And so from the physical training side, that's kind of what we're going on the recovery standpoint. That's another big thing that we're going to be doing, right? We're seeing it right now in the fall. On Monday nights, we have all the Crush ECNL athletes who come in, and for the past 5 or 6 weeks, they've had two games every weekend, and then had to come in Monday night. And so a big portion is now working recovery into the session. So for example, those athletes who come in, about a third of their session is just recovery work, so that they'll be ready come practice Tuesday and for the rest of the week.
Yeah, from a training standpoint, we talk about the importance of our athletes coming back to us in shape or at a level of fitness, and that's why we do testing to see where they're at. Because we've learned through sports science development that we can't just pile it on every day after day, because we'll see physical regression, and we're talking about long-term success of our athletes. So one of the things that we do is we manipulate our sessions, whether it's the size of the grid that we're doing, the number of players, that increases or decreases that periodization or the load management. So a 3v3 drill and a 10x10 square is going to be high intensity as opposed to 11v11, in training, because you're in a much larger space and more players. So that's one of the things. And so, we try to make sure that as we go into the weekend, our sessions are a little bit less. When we're coming out of a heavy weekend, as we first come out, like Danny said, there's a focus on recovery before we really get into it in the middle part of the week.
Okay, great. So looks like we only have time for one more question here, guys, and we have a lot more that came in. So thank you to everybody for sending in these fabulous questions. This last one, again, we're kind of trying to talk a little bit about long-term success. And the question is here. You guys have a very high-level club organization of different age groups. Is there any take-home tips, or what should we be thinking about as my son or daughter gets a little bit older, and what are colleges looking for? And it's a loaded question, but what are colleges looking for when evaluating my son or daughter? What can we start doing, or what tips do you have now for them as they can continue on and progress? Sorry, there's 5 questions in one there.
Yeah. So from a club perspective, one of the things that we always say is making sure that you're doing stuff on your own. And you've heard Dr. Downing and Danny talk about overuse injuries and things like that. I've spoke about the need to always return at a level of fitness. Cross-training is an important aspect to all of our athletes. It's a way to alleviate the stress and so forth. So when you have periods of break, it's important that you're doing stuff outside of soccer, potentially in the pool, where you're not working necessarily the same movements, but you're going to keep a level of fitness. And as you go long term, that's an important aspect that colleges are going to look at is what's this player like full circle, Are they dedicated outside of training? And what are they doing outside of training? I'm sure Carrie can talk to her recruitment and so forth, but as coaches, we get asked quite frequently by college coaches, what are they like? And we see that, a lot of our athletes are in spectrum in outside of season or outside of training, and Danny can talk about what they do in those periods, but there's a lot that you can be doing outside of training. It's just how you manage that to really, prime yourself for long-term success.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I think one thing that can maybe make you stand out compared to somebody else is just being the complete athlete. I think that comes with doing stuff on your own, whether that is, I didn't really have another sport or anything I did outside of soccer. I would just train more, but it was technical stuff. So it's stuff that you maybe don't get as much in a training with your team, because it's just very personal, and it's something that I thought I needed to work on. So I trained a lot technically outside of soccer, but the complete athlete as in like finding that balance of like soccer and life, because when you get to college it is a balance. We talked about that earlier. So I think being the complete athlete and knowing who you are, going into situations and stuff like that, but when it comes to college recruiting, just the complete athlete, like you can't really say no to it. So it's just kind of finding the balance and being the best at every aspect, maybe just like in a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, I think to wrap it up, I think all of us here are trying to put you all in the best position to perform well, but to be healthy, to limit your injuries and make them not to be major injuries. So from a college recruiting standpoint, I was a college baseball player, and my coach said to us a long time ago, the best ability is availability. If you're not injured and you can play, they're going to want you. So you could be very talented, but if you don't take care of your body, you don't take care of your mind, you're not going to be available to them to perform. And that's ultimately what Orlando Orthopedic Center, Spectrum, and Florida Craze Crush is trying to do for you.
Right. I love that point. And again, if I don't mind speaking here, but from my experience is utilizing all the resources that you just mentioned. I think sometimes we forget about what resources that you have, and you guys do a tremendous job of providing those resources at that club level. And that's really, really, really important, because when these kids go off into college, then they're going to have all these resources and then at a professional level at their fingertips. So they have to understand it's all there for them, man. Use it now while you can, and understand what's available to you so things don't become worse, or you can become that full circle player. Otherwise, if you don't use those resources, what's it to you, right? Mm-hmm. So just my thoughts. Yeah. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it very much. I think that's it. I think all the time we have, Corey, we got to wrap this thing up. But I want to thank you guys very much for attending. If you weren't able to see today's broadcast, that's okay. Don't worry. Don't stress. We're going to put it on our Facebook page at Orlando Ortho Facebook page, so you guys can check that out. Also, if you want to get any more information on our panelists, for Dr. Jeffrey Downing, that's orlandoortho.com, orlandoortho.com. For Danny and Spectrum, that's spectrumsp.com. And then Mark and his coaches and everybody with FKK in the club, that's floridacrazecrush.com, floridacrazecrush.com. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, taking your time out of this evening. Thank you guys so much to our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedules. And from all of us at Orlando Ortho, Orlando Pride, Spectrum, and FKK, to all of you guys at home, hope you're healthy and stay safe, guys. We'll see you soon, hopefully. Take care.